I was dreaming when I wrote this, forgive me if it goes astray. Think about what are the contenders for the greatest F1 seasons. 1976, 1986, 2007, 2012, all phenomenal of course. And yet, I find myself watching and reading up on a season that wouldn't necessarily feature on the same list. Unless you're a touch simple, you know I'm talking about 1999. This is all nostalgia driven of course. For me, this is what F1 cars look like, and what F1 cars sound like. I think this was the time where little Nick was starting to become a bit more aware of the world, and I attribute a moment in one of the races as my earliest memory, although it's probably distorted to the point of being a false memory by now. So I'm going to take you back to the past, to review a season that kicks ass. A season in which anything could happen, and did, and which no one seemed to want to win. I was a bit torn if I should do one big season video or do each race individually, and I've opted to do the latter, because I'm going to include some footage here and there, and it will be easier to re-edit shorter videos if they get taken down or anything. This is Mostly Racing, my name is Nick, and this is the 1999 Formula 1 season. To finish first you must finish. McLaren driver Mika Häkkinen won the 1998 World Drivers' Championship by 14 points from two-time world champion Michael Schumacher, who was trying to win his first world title for Ferrari. Between them, they won 14 out of the 16 races that season, and were undoubtedly the two best drivers in the world. All of pre-season testing suggested that the two most successful teams in F1, Ferrari and McLaren, would be the teams to beat. In other words, 1999 would be Häkkinen-Schumacher round 2. Teams are made up of two drivers of course. David Coulthard remained at McLaren, and in terms of a number 2 driver supporting a World Championship fighting teammate, I don't think you can get much better than DC. In 98, he finished on the podium in 9 of the 16 races, and won one of the 2 races that Mika and Michael didn't. For Ferrari, Irvine was retained following his 8 podium finishes from the previous season, but he was still winless and still suffering from significant lack of pace against Schumacher. For the rest of the teams, we have, for the weird Red Williams, the double back-to-back kart champion and F1 returnee Alex Zanardi, and the promising young Schumacher, Ralph, who picked up 3 podiums from his 2 seasons with Jordan. If you're not in the know, don't get too excited at seeing the future Paralympian and all-round legend Zanardi being involved for the season. He had an absolute mare. Granted, a lot wasn't his fault, but also a lot was. I should also say at this point, Zanardi and Michael Schumacher are still both fighting and recovering from their accidents, and I wish them all the best, and I'm sure you will do too. Jordan? No, there we go. What is with Jordan and making good looking cars? The Irish team were in the ascendancy, having experienced their best season in 1998 and scored their first victory in Belgium. They retained the services of the winner of the aforementioned 1998 Belgian Grand Prix, the 1996 world champion Damon Hill. Joining him was Beans Means Heinz Harald Frentzen, who was swapped out of the Williams team for not being very good, quite frankly, having been consistently outperformed by Jacques Villeneuve in the past 2 seasons. Benetton now. Well, if Jordan were in the ascendancy, then Benetton were a team in the descendancy. The noble Giancarlo Fisichella had picked up a couple of podiums in his first season for the team, and was looking like a really hot prospect. Although his teammate, the equally exciting prospect, Alexander Wurz, managed to finish above the Roman in the championship, despite not standing on the podium. The team would be hoping that these 2 young drivers would bring them back up the order, but don't get your hopes up. The Red Bull liveried Saubers were piloted by Jean Alesi in his second season with the Swiss team, and by the Brazilian pay driver Pedro Diniz, who is most well known for being on fire that one time. Sauber were the perennial midfield team, and had scored 1 podium per season for the past 4 years, and were hoping to step up following their best championship performance of 6th in 1998. Arrows came into 99 with a new look and 2 new drivers. Pedro De La Rosa made his debut and had spent the previous year as the test driver for Jordan after winning both the Japanese Formula Nippon and GT championships in 1997. Keeping the Japanese theme going, he was joined by Tora Takagi, who had failed to score a point in 98 with Tyrrell. To be fair, Haas are probably more likely to score a point than the limping, dying Tyrrell team in their final season. The team was sponsored by Orange and T-. We'll get onto them a bit later on in the season. Speaking of final seasons, the Stewart team entered their 3rd and ultimate season, with Rubens Barrichello and a signing from Sauber, Johnny Herbert, local hero to us Essex folk. In the team's 33 race history, they had only managed a grand total of 11 points, 6 of which came from the 1997 Monaco Grand Prix, when Barrichello finished second in the team's only hurrah. Prost, oh dear. In their debut season in 1997, the Prost team finished 6th in the championship and scored 2 podiums thanks to Olivier Panis, and Jarno Trulli even got amongst the points after he replaced Shinji Nakano for the second half of the season. In 1998, the team only scored 1 point. Moving on. Minardi, the little team that could. Well, couldn't. The team hadn't scored a point since 1995, so they signed a driver who holds the record for most races without scoring a World Championship point, Luca Badoa. And the 1998 Open Fortuna by Nissan champion and future 24 Hours of Le Mans winner, Marc Genet. Finally, BAR. Wow, that zipper livery. It will drain you of your sanity. Technically a new entry, the British-American racing team was essentially Tyrrell, just with new owners. It's not unheard of for a team to be built around a driver, but this team was literally built for the 1997 world champion and all-round weirdo Jacques Villeneuve.
So the one button a Formula 1 steering wheel doesn't have is a button to control the in-car stereo. And here's the reason why.
Hi, this is Jacques Villeneuve. This is my first song.
The team principal was Craig Pollock, who happened to be Villeneuve's manager and former school teacher, and the team set up a new factory in Brackley. Yes, that's Brackley. Joining the French-Canadian was the reigning FIA GT champion, Brazilian Ricardo Zonta. So what about that zipper livery? Like most tobacco companies, British American Tobacco had several brands under their umbrella. Product differentiation, an increase of overall market share, and all that fun stuff. So, on their launch, one car promoted the Lucky Strike brand, while the other was in 555 colours. Reminiscent of Colin McRae's Subaru. Slight problem, you can't have split liveries in F1, talking about falling at the first hurdle. To compensate, the colours were split in half on each car, and this is what we got. Moving on. The 1999 Australian Grand Prix at Albert Park, Melbourne. If there was much of a question of which car was the faster, McLaren or Ferrari, there wasn't much doubt after Saturday. Hakkinen stuck his MP440 on pole by the best part of half a second from teammate Coulthard to give us a McLaren front row lockout. Michael Schumacher qualified third, a stonking 1.319 seconds off pole. 1.3 seconds now, that's a dominant car. Even Mercedes in the turbo hybrid era would double take at a gap like that. The biggest surprise in the first competitive session of the season was seeing the steward of Barrichello join his future teammate on the second row. Bear in mind the Brazilian had finished in 1998 in 12th place. On the third row was Frentzen and Irvine, with the latter being half a second slower than Schumacher. Fairly standard from what we've seen between the two over the past couple of seasons. The formation lap is incredibly important. Making sure the car is ready for the start of the race, putting energy through the brakes and the tyres, gets them to optimum temperature and ensures each driver can put the best opening lap in they can. I also think it's a phenomenally good way of building tension, especially seeing the cars slowly line up on the grid. Excitement builds with each additional car until they're all in place. It's the start of the season, it's been a long wait. 1 light, 2 lights, 3 lights, both stewards catch fire. Well, I feel well and truly teased, thanks Ford. Naturally the start was delayed, as both the stewards were wheeled off the grid. At the time, teams would bring 3 cars to the race weekends. The 2 race cars, and 1 backup, referred to as the T car. The team opted to give the spare car to Barrichello, so he could take the second start from the pit lane, while Herbert would start the season with a DNS. Did not start. Everybody one more time. The lights turn green for the second formation lap, and Hakkinen is motionless in his grid spot for a few moments, before he pulls away, critically before the whole field goes by, or else he would have had to start from the back, as Michael Schumacher had done in the previous race, the season finale of 1998. Of course, this wasn't the only time that Schumacher, of the Michael variety, had been forced to start at the back after stalling on the grid, as it also happened to him in this race. That's right. Although Mike Hakkinen I've written here, although Mika Hakkinen was able to get away in time, Michael could not, and neither could Tora Takagi, and both would have to start from the back. So now we're in a really weird situation. With Barrichello starting from the pits and Schumacher at the back, there was no second row of the grid. I think that's enough preamble, and let's finally talk about the race. Second time they lined up on the grid, all 5 lights on, Lights out, and it was action in Australia.
And Mika Häkkinen gets away well, so does Coulthard. And look at Frentzen coming up alongside now. Where is Michael Schumacher?
And Schumacher's still
in third position, and in fourth place is Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
Damon Hill was an early DNF after being nerfed off the track at turn 3. After lap 1, the top 6 were Häkkinen, Coulthard, Irvine, who was already 3 seconds off the lead, Frentzen, Ralf Schumacher and Fisichella. Sadly, it seems all the weirdness and excitement for the opening of the race was taken up by cars struggling off the grid, because not much was happening on track, amongst the front runners anyway. Seeing the McLarens pull away by a couple of seconds per lap, Murray Walker said,
"It's a demonstration race at the present moment, and there is the proof."
On just lap 4. Oof, as the children say. Thank goodness Michael Schumacher and Barrichello had to start near the back, as they were proving the only excitement by charging through the field. Not that we'd see much of it though. By lap 14, the McLarens had pulled out a 17-second lead over Irvine, and a casual racing fan may have switched off by this point. But more fool them. Coulthard, who had been running second by about a second, suddenly slowed and pulled into the pits to retire. More dramatically, Villeneuve, who had been running strongly, lost his rear wing on the approach to the fast chicane, bringing out the safety car. Here's a fun game for the season, by the way. It's called Did Villeneuve Finish the Race? Here, of course, the answer is no. The safety car, of course, bunches the field, which was very good for the phantom second row drivers who had made their way up to 7th and 8th, and were now right up with the leading pack. End of lap 17, the safety car peels off, and the moment I think this race is most well remembered for.
Häkkinen slow away!
Haha. Only joking.
Häkkinen slow away! Häkkinen very slow away! And what's happening? They're waiting for a green flag, I think, because they're hovering, and Irvine takes the lead. No, Häkkinen's got a problem.
Häkkinen's got a problem, look so! What amazing! He must have overheated, because up into second place goes Ralf Schumacher. Ralf Schumacher in the Williams is second, Heinz-Harald Frentzen is in third place, Ferrari leads, and Trulli is in fourth place, and Fisichella's
There's Frentzen, look, Frentzen taking second.
From nowhere, Irvine is now leading, and in the chaos there were a few changes of position. Most notably, Frentzen and Jarno Trulli in the Prost, both getting past Ralf Schumacher for what was now second and third. Lap 20. Alex Zanardi, who had been really struggling for pace, performed an uncanny impression of me on literally every and all F1 games. I'm not ashamed to admit I use flashbacks. Not as lucky for Zanardi, who was out and the safety car was deployed for the second time. Further good news for Schumacher, who was now up to 4th. Interestingly, Barrichello used this opportunity to pit. I wonder if it works out for him. Oh, what's this? Car number 16 under investigation. Restart. There was contact between the Minardi of Genet and the Prost of Trulli, putting them both out. Massive shame for Trulli, who'd been running third before making a pit stop. To be fair, the crash was mostly on the Italian. Also, Michael Schumacher was suspiciously slow and had fallen behind his brother by a few seconds in the space of just a lap. All became clear as he approached the fast chicane where Villeneuve had gone off. Puncture, right rear. Ah, pain. From the back of the grid to 4th, only for his chances to unravel like his tyre. He tried so hard and got so far, but in the end it didn't even matter. While those at the front were having their issues, unseen by the cameras and not noticed by the commentators, Barrichello, who had pitted behind the safety car, remember, was up to 8th. Actually, make that 5th. Wirtz pitted from 5th, and Zonta was presumably passed at turn 1, which of course we didn't get to see. Actually, make that 4th, as Diniz had pulled off at turn 3. By this point, having just pitted and setting the fastest times of anyone, he had to be one of the race favourites. Oh. Remember that he jumped into the T-car? Because they had already completed the first formation lap, the race had technically already began, meaning that a car swap wasn't permitted.
Breaking the law.
So few cars left in the race, he actually managed to rejoin in 9th. He was by no means out of points contention. Notice how I'm not talking about the fight for the lead all that much. That's because there wasn't much of a fight. Irvine, Frentzen, Ralf Schumacher, all lapping about the same pace and a few seconds apart from each other. Lap 34. The leading 3 had made their pit stops, but Fisichella was running second as he was going long, having made his stop during the first safety car, so he was in a false second. The Roman finally pitted on lap 36. On the start of lap 37, the order was Irvine, Frentzen, Ralf Schumacher, Pedro De La Rosa 4th in the Arrows on his debut, Fisichella 5th, Takagi in the other arrows 6th, Zonta, Barrichello, Badoer, and Michael Schumacher 10th and last. To add insult to injury, the double world champion started having issues with his steering wheel and had to come into the pits and swap for a new one. Lap 40, De La Rosa pits and comes out 5th, while Barrichello takes Takagi for 6th. A few laps later, Barrichello dispatches the Spaniard, putting him 5th. Lap 46, Irvine had a 6-second lead over Frentzen, and Frentzen in turn had a 4-second lead over Ralf Schumacher, and again nothing really to report on the battle for the lead. Although, Zonta, also in his first Grand Prix, showed his inexperience, as Irvine caught up to the back of the BIR, and Zonta simply refused to yield. Blue flags waving, as was Irvine's hand, and suddenly Frentzen is catching the Ulsterman hand over fist. Thankfully for Irvine, Zonta's Supertech engine died a death. He had been driving pretty well for the new team, but did not cover himself in glory there.
Frustratingly,
Both Frentzen and Ralf Schumacher suddenly found bags of paste in the last couple of laps, and were rapidly closing in on Irvine. Why couldn't they have pushed earlier and given us a race? Too little, too late. Irvine rounds the final corner to win his first Formula 1 Grand Prix, his first win since his Le Mans class win in 1994. He was, of course, joined by Frentzen, who continued Jordan strong from the second half of the 98 season, and Ralf Schumacher, who scored his 4th podium finish of his career on his Williams debut. Overall, I'd give the race 5 out of 10. All the strangeness with the several starts, the attrition, the safety car restart, and some good battling for the minor points kept things interesting, but save for these moments, there really isn't much worth remembering in terms of action. Driver of the day? I'm torn between Barrichello, who had to swap cars at the start, served a stop-go penalty, but still ended up 5th, on the lead lap, and was at times the fastest car on track, and Pedro De La Rosa, who finished 6th and in the points on his debut in one of the slowest cars. The championship standings, of course, reflected the race result. Irvine and Ferrari top, while Michael Schumacher and the McLarens pointless. Next race, Autodromo José Carlos Pache, or more simply, Interlagos, Brazil. I'll see you then.